The following is a CNN special report.
This is a CNN special report, Showdown in Indiana, the battle over religious rights. I'm Chris Cuomo in New York. This was the scene from the protests in Indianapolis. It's an ongoing war over law and culture. The latest attack, according to gay rights advocates, legalized discrimination under the guise of the Indiana Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Now, ever since Governor Mike Pence signed it Thursday, protesters have taken to the streets in Indiana, and outrage is bubbling up around the country. A growing number of major businesses lining up to say, so long as Indiana has this law, they're going to do their business elsewhere. But now, hold on a second. Indiana is not the first state to do this. There are 19 others that have laws just like this, and they all grew out of a federal law signed by Bill Clinton in 1993. Supporters of what Indiana just did say the law is not designed to target gays, but to protect religious minorities and the fundamental right to exercise your faith. So the question is, do people just have it wrong? And if so, why won't any of the dozen-plus Indiana lawmakers involved in this come on to defend the law? But perhaps the biggest question of all is what happens next? For that, let's get to CNN's Miguel Marquez. He's live in Indianapolis. What do we know from there?
Well, we know that the city council tonight here in Indianapolis passed a resolution opposing SB 101, this law that's now put into effect. The mayor, the Republican mayor of the city here, signed an executive order asking the governor to turn that law around, to fix it, as he said. All of this as the Final Four is coming to down, the NCAA expressing its concern about the law as well. It is a full court press against SB 101. Protest and anger across Indiana. Gays, lesbians, and their supporters rallying in opposition to SB 101, the so-called Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
I have two kids that could possibly not be served because somebody doesn't believe in me being married to another woman.
Opponents say the law could be used by businesses to turn gays and transgender customers away if a business feels their religious freedom is being violated. It came about after Indiana was forced to allow same-sex marriages last year. Supporters say businesses will no longer be forced to support same-sex marriage.
It's crazy because we just made gay marriage legal in October, and it's like one step forward, 1,000 steps back.
Indiana Governor Mike Pence, who signed the bill in private, dodged over and again on ABC's This Week whether the bill could prompt discrimination.
Yes or no? If a florist in Indiana refuses to serve a gay couple at their wedding, is that legal now in Indiana?
George, this is where this debate has gone with misinformation and frankly,
it's just a question, sir. Yes or no?
Well, there's been shameless rhetoric about my state.
Governor Pence said the bill would stand, no changes. Members of his own party today in the state legislature weren't so sure.
Clearly, there's unsettled waters right now, right? And that could have far-ranging impact. We determined we needed to step in and be sure that those waters are calmed. And if that requires a legislative clarification, that's what we're working on. 20 states currently have religious freedom laws on the books. Some of those states also specifically protect rights based on sexual orientation. Opponents say the problem with Indiana's law, it's broad. Any person or business could seek protection based on religious beliefs, free of government involvement. Utah has a similar constitutional amendment just introduced in the state house that would take effect in 2017. There are protests in Arkansas where the governor has a bill similar to Indiana's on his desk. The first Religious Freedom Act became federal law under Democrat Bill Clinton in 1993. It had bipartisan support and aimed to protect individuals' religious rights against government intrusion. In 1997, states started passing their own religious freedom laws after the Supreme Court ruled the federal law didn't apply to them. More recent controversy over gay marriage has pushed some states to adopt increasingly broad religious freedom protections. Indiana's law has put the state in the line of fire. Comedians are taking aim.
You'll be able to tell which stores are supporting the new law because they'll have these helpful little signs.
Hey,
1
hey, 1 our state. Now, hey, 1 our state. Protest and anger across Indiana. The battle over religious rights. I'm Chris Cuomo in New York. This was the scene from the protests in Indianapolis. This was the latest attack, according to gay rights advocates. Legalized discrimination under the guise of the Indiana Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It came about after Indiana was forced to allow same-sex marriages last year. Supporters say businesses will no longer be forced to support same-sex marriage.
Yes or no? If a florist in Indiana refuses to serve a gay couple at their wedding, is that legal now in Indiana? Republican Governor Mike Pence has signed or has penned a Wall Street Journal article tonight saying that he will not change his mind, that the law doesn't discriminate against gays and lesbians or the transgendered. And there is still, though, great pressure from all sides for him to make changes to this law. How soon it could happen? They have a supermajority in both houses of the legislature here. They could do it very quickly, but most think it will take some time for it to make its way back to the legislature and then back to the desk of the governor, if it happens at all. Chris?
Well, Miguel, they certainly didn't see this coming. Protests are one thing, but to hear that 2 states, Connecticut and now Washington State, have said they won't do business with Indiana as long as this law is on the books. Unusual, to say the least. Thank you very much for the reporting. Now, there are 2 sides to this story. And like I said, we reached out to all of the sponsors and co-sponsors of the bill, as well as the governor of Indiana, Governor Mike Pence, who signed it into law. Now, here's a picture of a bunch of them at the signing. You see all religious groups, people oriented there, some lobbyists. They all look pretty pumped, and yet they all ignored the invite or simply said no. But we can report some progress. We're fortunate to have Indiana Lieutenant Governor Sue Ellspermann with us tonight. Lieutenant Governor, thank you very much for picking up the baton and coming here. It's important to answer these questions. Let's start off with the question that the governor did not want to answer, Lieutenant Governor. If the florist, if the photographer, if the candlestick maker gets approached by gays who want to marry, can they say no, and is that now legal in Indiana?
Well, we don't think that's legal in Indiana. And by the way, hello, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Good to have you.
Certainly in Indiana, we don't and we won't discriminate. I think if you saw the governor's Wall Street piece today, he says he abhors discrimination, and he said personally that if he was in a restaurant where a gay couple was not being served, he would not return to that restaurant. And I think that really captures how most Hoosiers feel about it. We very much do not support discrimination.
Well, let me ask you, why wouldn't he answer the question yesterday? I'm sure you talked to him about it.
You know, I think he was trying to stay with what is RFRA, and, you know, as you've heard and you've replayed, many people just didn't understand what it is and the 19 states that have it, the federal level of it, and the protections that it provides. But I think we're continuing to try to really clarify.
Lieutenant Governor, why did you make this law? What is the reason behind it?
Yeah. Well, in Indiana, I think it has a lot to do with the Hobby Lobby law because of Obamacare. And as that unfolded, we realized here in the state of Indiana that we did not have the state protection that paralleled the federal protections for religious freedom. And we're a state that really values those First Amendment rights.
But your law is so different than the 93 law and the other 19 states that have them. You allow businesses to basically be not just people, but people with a religious conscience. And you're allowing them to say that they won't do business with people if it is offensive to their religion, and the LGBT community seems to have a target on its back. I mean, isn't that just the honest truth of what's going on here?
No, I really don't think that's what we believe that law does. And I think that's why, as you heard today, the leadership in our General Assembly came together and said, look, this law is not intended to discriminate. We have great respect for the LGBT community and all those who are Hoosiers. We do not discriminate here. And if we have not clarified that in a fair way, we want to do that. And I think that is exactly what the General Assembly is about doing right now.
But I'm wondering if we are being open and honest about what motivated this law. You say, well, it's pushing for religious freedom. The original law was designed to protect religious minorities, Native Americans from smoking peyote, the Amish for having to put an LED light on their carriages. You're now empowering the majority, businesses, big groups, largely Christians. And that is going to be a very different impact. And if we put up the picture again of the lobbyists who are standing behind the governor, he took a picture with these guys. Literally, there are people in this picture who have gone out of their way to destroy the reputation of LGBT, use ugly words, and here they are celebrating this law. How can it not be about that, Lieutenant Governor?
Well, Chris, some of those people in that picture are nuns, and I certainly
No,
wouldn't put
not
them
that picture.
in that piece. So,
not that
okay,
picture.
I'm not
more
seeing
than one
the picture, but
taken. You know
yeah.
what I'm talking about.
So,
you know the gentleman that I'm talking about. The
But
names,
in
Micah
Indiana,
Clark, Lieutenant Governor Kurt Smith,
Yeah, sure.
Eric Miller. You know who these gentlemen are. You know what they represent ideologically. It's not a coincidence that they're standing behind the governor, is it?
Well, I think for most who signed that onto that bill and those who support it, it really was what I said. It was the Hobby Lobby case. It was understanding that we wanted to protect the religious freedom of all Hoosiers, just like 30 other states enjoy. And, you know, it is not about discrimination. We really welcome everyone in the state of Indiana. Our city, Indianapolis, is considered one of the best places for young professionals to work. We have great sporting events. You talked about the Final Four that'll happen here this weekend. We are absolutely a warm and welcoming state. And that said, we're understanding the misconceptions and what's happening and just the fact that these accusations are coming out. We have work to do to make sure people understand what it is and what it isn't. We owe it to Hoosiers and we owe it to Americans, those who do business here in Indiana, those who might want to come live here. We owe it to them to really clarify for them.
You are well aware of the situation. You have businesses, you have entire states, you have the NCAA, you have everybody saying this law is objectionable to us for different reasons. The fix, and I don't know if it is a fix as a lawyer, by the way, but the political fix for the governor was include LGBT in your protected classes under state law. He said, no way, it's not on my agenda. If you're so open, if you're so about the inclusiveness, and I'm not talking about Indiana's people, I don't think it's fair to pull them into this. This is about the lawmakers, this is about you guys at the top. If that's what you want to do, why don't you include them under your state law of protection against discrimination?
Well, I think that is probably not a decision for the governor or our administration to make alone. That is why you have a General Assembly. And in the press
he said
conference
no, Lieutenant
earlier
Governor.
today,
He didn't say it's not my job.
Let
He
me
said
talk
it's no.
about the General Assembly. The General Assembly said that is something that their leadership is willing to look at longer term. They don't think it can be done in the 4 weeks that are left in session, but I think these are conversations to be had, and our governor and our leadership are working together, and we do want to make sure, it is just incredibly important that here in Indiana, we make sure that people are comfortable that this law does not discriminate, and we are looking at the options of what needs to be done to make sure that doesn't happen.
Lieutenant Governor, before I let you go, would you be willing to make a statement to people of faith in Indiana and elsewhere who are seeing this as a rationale for striking out against people who they don't agree with in terms of lifestyle? Would you like to make a statement to people who are saying, if I don't want to deal with gays, I don't have to, that's my religion? Do you believe that that's a legitimate exercise of religious faith?
Well, no, we expect all of our people to be welcoming. We expect our businesses are that way. I'm going to speak to it as a mother. My husband and I have 4 daughters. I have 3 grandchildren. I certainly don't want those children or grandchildren to be discriminated against. You know, I was a female engineer at a time when not many females were engineers. I've been up close to discrimination. I don't want that. We don't want that. The governor has said he doesn't want that. So I really think this is something, I know the whole country is watching us here in Indiana, but I think you're going to see us figure this out together. It is important, and we do want to be a welcoming state to everyone, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about it.
Absolutely, Lieutenant Governor. We know that there's a lot of energy there among Republicans as well as Democrats. We look forward to what comes next. And thank you for stepping up and coming on to answer the questions. Extend our invitation again to the governor. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor.
All right. You're very welcome. Thank you, Chris.
Appreciate it. Now, coming up after the break, by most accounts, this law that we're talking about sailed right through the State House. But the debate is heating up, and we have the 2 sides for you straight ahead.
Called upon Governor Pence in the Indiana legislature to fix this law. Either repeal it or pass a law that protects all who live, work, and visit Indiana. And do so immediately.
That is the mayor of Indianapolis, a brother Republican to the governor, wasting no time to condemn this now controversial law. It's his city that has become the epicenter of protests against this religious freedom law. Throughout the evening, we've been watching the protests. They heated up across the state as Hoosiers stand up to be heard on this controversial law from both sides. You have, "Don't let the state tell me how to practice my faith" on one, and on the other you have, "Don't make me a victim of your beliefs" on the other. So who's right? Let's debate. Sarah Warbelow, she's with the Human Rights Campaign, an organization dedicated to equal rights for the LGBT community, and Mr. Travis Weber with the Family Research Council, a conservative advocacy group. Thank you to both of you for being with us. Let's begin this. Travis, you know what the pushback against the law is that this law is basically set up to allow businesses to say we don't want to do business with gay people, especially when they're getting married or anything that we don't like, and that's our faith. Is that fair?
It's not fair. The law merely allows people to bring a religious claim in court proceedings. Sometimes that arises in the context of religious beliefs and sexuality. It certainly arises in that context, but it also arises in a number of other contexts dealing with a number of religions across the board. So it's not fair to claim it's merely about discrimination and sexuality.
Sarah?
Look, we support religious liberties. It's why we have the First Amendment. But this law was intended to allow for discrimination against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. There's no doubt about it. The state legislature had the opportunity to adopt an amendment explicitly saying that the law couldn't be used to undermine civil rights law, and they chose not to pass it.
Travis, there is some stink on this law about that it was a makeup for what happened with that amendment to block gay marriage. And there is that picture of the governor with these men standing behind him who are known for being outspoken haters of the LGBT community, not just politics. Is that what this was? Was this a make good for that constituency?
I don't think so at all. I think it'd be very difficult to call these people who have genuine religious objections to being forced to be complicit in sexual practices and sexual ceremonies against their religion to be haters. You asked Barronelle Stutzman out in Washington State, who didn't want to be forced to be part of a same-sex marriage ceremony with her small business. And she didn't hate her customers at all. She happily served gay people for years. And she says that to the person who sued her, "I would hug him if he came in my door. I just don't want to be forced to play a part in his ceremony." That doesn't sound like a hater to me, and this is not fair to paint people who have genuine objections as filled with hate.
The question is what you make them do. So, Sarah, what do you say to those who say, listen, this is just about my religion. I don't believe in you marrying your partner. I don't want to be a part of it.
Well, they don't have to attend weddings of same-sex couples or participate in the wedding itself. But when you are a business and you open yourself up to the public, you're expected to serve everyone on equal terms. It's why we have a long history in this country of prohibiting discrimination on the basis of race, on the basis of religion, on the basis of sex in public accommodations. All business owners should be treating their patrons equally and fairly.
Now, Sarah, you're going to hear people flip this analogy on you and say, well, wait a minute. If this were a Jewish baker and some KKK couple came in and said, we want you to make a cake, if he said no, well, then how would you feel about the situation?
Well, most of these business owners really are providing cakes to their customers across the board, but there are a select few who are choosing to discriminate. And there's a huge difference between having to write something objectionable on a cake and being asked to provide a cake for a same-sex couple. And it's not just limited to that context. This bill has the potential to undermine the many cities in Indiana who have adopted non-discrimination protections, including Indianapolis, in the employment context and in the housing context as well.
Travis, this law does go farther than any other one on the books right now, namely by allowing corporations to not just be people under the law, which is done from time to time, but to be people of religious conscience and exercising faith as a business. And that has people upset. Do you believe that it's overreaching and that that's another signal as to what this is really about?
Well, not at all. I mean, corporations exercise social goods and act for the social good all the time in a number of contexts. And to target them because it's religion that they're acting to further and enact their religious beliefs and how they run their corporations, that's not fair at all when corporations are free to act for a number of social goods. So, and as we've seen in the Hobby Lobby case, corporations are animated by the people behind them, and religion drives how we interact in a society where we have differences of belief, but those differences should not be held against us merely because we're trying to make a living.
Travis, here's what I don't get. how does working with a gay marriage affect your ability to be a Christian? Why can't you be the Christian you want to be just with your own actions? Why does it require some form of judgment against somebody else?
Well, I don't think it's judgment at all. And I think it comes down to this specific person and the religious objections they have. Not everyone is going to have the same objection that Barronelle Stutzman had, but we're not the people to be judging her religious objection. That's between her and God. And in our country where we have differences of opinion, we've long had a way to work those out and live side by side in a pluralistic manner. And so really, I don't think the question, the question should we be asking ourselves is not what should you be doing to bring your religion into line with proper Christianity. That's between the person and God. We need to conduct ourselves with equality and fairness as we live side by side, and this merely allows religious claims to be asserted in that context.
Sarah, does that work for you as an understanding of how somebody exercises their faith?
We struggle in this country with discrimination. It's something that's plagued our country for generations. It's why we've adopted non-discrimination laws. And let's be clear, this bill not only has the potential for negative ramifications for LGBT people, but also people of faith. This would allow a business owner, a retailer, to refuse to sell a wedding dress potentially to someone who is a different faith than they are.
It doesn't have to just be LGBT. It could be a Muslim. It could be whatever you decide to say that your faith doesn't allow. And that's going to create a gray area and a lot of litigation. I want to thank both of you for coming on and making the points from your side and doing it in a very civil manner. This debate will benefit from that greatly, and hopefully you guys are an example for others. Thank you for being on with us.
Thank you so much.
All right, now as you know from New Day on CNN, we take these topics to fuel your understanding. That's why we're doing this. So what are the questions and opinions that were provoked by that debate and what you've seen so far? Bring them on. You can tweet me at Chris Cuomo, and you can use the hashtag #IndianaLaw, and we will use those throughout the show. Now, coming up on Showdown in Indiana, the politics of religious rights. Who is for this bill and who is against it? You're going to be surprised by the list. Plus, did Barack Obama and Bill Clinton once support similar measures? That's what supporters of the bill say. We'll tell you what they have to say about that straight ahead. All right, this is a special report. Showdown in Indiana. Protesters were in the streets. The media is filled with outrage, but who's going to win in this showdown? The free exercise of religion without state interference, or those claiming to be targeted by bigotry? Now let's take one step back. 20 states have religious freedom laws on the books since 1997, and that's when the Supreme Court left this matter up to states. Most have gone by with little reaction, so why now? Why this one? Well, one could argue the Indiana law goes farther than others in giving businesses the ability to act as religious people. Yet others say times are simply changing with respect to gay rights. Look at the numbers on your screen. Latest poll suggests that at least the idea of gay marriage is gaining acceptance. So what is a politician who wants to be president to do? One thing is for sure, they cannot avoid these issues any longer. Let's bring in Jeff Zeleny from Washington with that. Jeff, thanks for being with us.
Chris, thank you. Now, Republican presidential candidates are jumping or being pushed into this debate. But as the fight over same-sex marriage becomes more of a non-issue, at least politically, Republicans are turning their attention to a battle they believe they can win. That's a battle over religious liberty, they say, not discrimination.
The people, united, will never be defeated.
Religious freedom laws spilling over into the 2016 presidential race. Some Republicans trying to walk a fine line between satisfying social conservatives without limiting their broader appeal to younger and more moderate voters.
So no one here is saying that it should be legal to deny someone service at a restaurant or at a hotel because of their sexual orientation. The flip side of it is, though, should a photographer be punished for refusing to do a wedding that their faith teaches them is not one that is valid in the eyes of God?
For his part, former Florida Governor Jeb Bush late today offered a staunch defense of Indiana's approach.
Well, I think Governor Pence has done the right thing. Florida has a law like this. Bill Clinton signed a law like this at the federal level. This is simply allowing people of faith space to be able to express their beliefs, to be able to be people of conscience. I think once the facts are established, people aren't going to see this as discriminatory at all.
All potential GOP candidates say they're taking a stand for religious liberty.
I'm very much a believer that the scripture teaches that you hate the sin and love the sinner. But at the same time, I don't think the law should be forcing Americans to violate their religious faith.
But it's not yet clear the candidates are eager to make it an issue. None of them talked about it today. Democrats like Hillary Clinton are happy to push Republicans. She's already weighing in, saying on Twitter, "Sad this new Indiana law can happen in America today. We shouldn't discriminate against people because of who they love." The politics of gay marriage are quickly changing, but still tricky inside the GOP. Senator Rand Paul told a prayer breakfast last week that a moral crisis was at hand. His private remarks were recorded by the Christian Broadcasting Network.
The moral crisis we have in our country, there is a role for us trying to figure out things like marriage.
But on a college campus last year, Paul told CNN's Peter Hamby that Republicans must be less rigid.
People change their minds all the time on this issue, and even within the Republican Party, there are people whose child turns out to be gay, and they're like, oh, well, maybe I'm going to rethink this issue.
It's a contradiction challenging the Republican Party. At least one prominent Republican governor, Pat McCrory of North Carolina, is breaking ranks. He said today he won't sign such a law in his state.
What is the problem they're trying to solve? And I haven't seen it up to this point in time.
Now, not all presidential candidates seem quite sure where they stand. Ted Cruz and Jeb Bush offered a full-throated defense today. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker was a bit more non-committal when asked if his state should pass a similar law. Now, the Iowa conservative activists we talked to today said anyone who hopes to become the party's presidential nominee should support religious freedom laws. But the question here, Chris, is this: whether all of this makes winning the general election even more difficult.
And also we have to understand, Jeff, how is this really a function of religious freedom, even though that is the title of the law? Let's discuss that now. Thank you for the reporting. Let's bring in some people to discuss the political implications here. We have Sarah Elizabeth Cupp, S.E. Cupp, and Mr. Van Jones, two of our best here. Thanks to both of you. Good to see you both. S.E., let me start with you because your side is driving this situation here. Here's the part that I want you to help me with. Put the law aside for a second. How is it, in the furtherance of somebody's religious exercise, let's say as a Christian, to deny service to a gay person? How does that make you a Christian?
Oh, well, I'm not going to speak on behalf of Christians. I'm an atheist, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of all Republicans. I'm a Republican who supports gay marriage, like a lot of other Republicans. But I think there's been some misinformation about this law. It doesn't allow you to discriminate against someone. It allows you to bring up religion as a defense in a court of law, which is not obligated to uphold that defense.
Right.
So I have issues with this law, trust me, but that's more because I don't think that anti-discrimination laws are generally very effective at ending discrimination. But to be honest, I think that the outrage over this law seems incredibly uneven. We just showed a picture of Hillary Clinton's tweet about this.
Yeah.
She's sad that Indiana can allow a law like this. Yet she's happy to take money to the Clinton Global Initiative from Saudi Arabia, which literally beheads people for being homosexual. Tim Cook of Apple is upset with Indiana, but I'm sure Apple still does business in Russia, where discriminating against gays isn't just a possibility, it's codified into law.
Right, but
so I appreciate all of this animus toward the discrimination, but let's apply it evenly.
All right, but that's not even, because you're distracting from this one by pointing out other situations. We'll take those on another day.
I'm not distracting. I hope, Chris,
are.
that you do an hour-long special on all of that kind of discrimination as well.
But because, well, it depends what it means in terms of your cultural dynamic. There have been 19 other laws like this. None are as expansive as this one. None seem as bold as this one does in terms of its intentionality. You saw the men standing behind the governor in that picture. You know what their backgrounds are when it comes to LGBT. They just seem to now be dealing with the fallout of a law they thought was going to slip past. My question to you, Van Jones, is that there is a movement in this country to make being religious seemingly a bad thing, such that lawmakers are being pushed to protect people of faith from state action like what we saw with Obamacare, where Hobby Lobby was forced into providing care, paying for health insurance that would allow contraceptives and other things that they were against. Do people of faith need to be protected from the government?
Well, I just want to say, as a Christian and as someone who is raising my kids in the church, I am very aware that there's an anti-religious backlash that seems to be coming from secular America, and I'm very concerned about it. At the same time, this law, to me, is not really about that. This seems to me to be a very, very obvious attempt to let people hide their bigotry behind the Bible and get the law on their side in doing that. There is nothing in the Bible that says you're going to hell if you give a gay person a cake. It's not in the Bible. There's nothing in the Bible that says if you make some flowers for a lesbian couple, you're going to hell. At some point, we have to accept that people often use religious rationale to excuse bigotry. It happened under segregation. I grew up in the South. I was born in '68. My parents were born under segregation. I heard even as a child, God separated the races. He put the races on different continents. It's God's will. And if you are opposing what I'm saying that segregation is right, you're opposing my religion. So we have a country where we have to balance true religious freedom, the freedom to practice your faith, versus some of these excuses. Intent matters. The intent here is clear. The intent is to give another weapon to people who do not want to support the rights of gays and lesbians, and that is very, very wrong. And as a Christian, I take offense to it.
Do you buy, SC, that this was a give back to Indiana Republicans who wanted the gay marriage amendment there and they lost, and that this law was somewhat of a consolation for them? Do you buy that?
Yeah, I think politically it probably was an effort at, grasping at some kind of victory here. And what I think is a shame is that politically it probably wasn't a very smart idea. I was with Governor Pence 2 years ago. He sort of gave me a tour of Indianapolis and showed me all of the businesses that he had helped bring in while governor. And what's a shame is that I think a lot of these businesses now are kind of grandstanding on this opportunity and withdrawing or saying they're not going to expand, rightly or wrongly. And that really does hurt Governor Pence if he had any national aspirations. And it hurts Indiana politics. It hurts Indiana's economy. And so, again, whether you think pulling out is right or wrong, the fact that they are doing it, I think, is a huge bruise to both Governor Pence and the state of Indiana.
What do you think about his play of saying we're not going to make LGBT a protected class under state law? I'm not going to do that. By the way, I don't know if legal, hold on a second, Van, I don't know if legally that would be a fix, because this will get a little confusing, but if you did that, you create LGBT as a protected class like race and creed and the other ones we have, gender, but that just initiates state action that would trigger this law. The state action would now be, you must respect the rights of LGBT, and now you'd be able to initiate the law. So I don't know if it's a fix, but politically, Van, when he said that, I'm not going to do that, what signal did that send to you?
Well, I thought that was bad. The other signal that I think people are paying attention to is the fact that the legislature did have the explicit opportunity to amend this bill to make sure that it was not about discrimination, and they refused to do it. So when you have those kind of signals all put together, it does bolster the case that this is not about religious liberty. I don't call it a religious liberty bill. I call it a license to discriminate bill. Now, Essie is right in terms of the way that it gets played out. It's an affirmative defense in court. But a business owner can use this internally to say, listen, we're just not going to do this. I have a problem with this idea that corporations are people. Corporations don't go to church. Corporations don't pray. At a certain point, as an entrepreneur, and I am one, when you get the protection of being a corporate entity, you are getting a lot of benefit from society for yourself to have that corporate shell.
Right, but you got to be careful there, Van. Got to be careful. Yeah. Back to Roman times, up through our reckoning of the 14th Amendment, corporations have been seen as people in the eyes of the law. Them having religious prerogatives is something new and expansive in this law, and that was an issue. But S.E. Cupp, thank you very much for laying it down within the context of your own personal beliefs, and you as well, Van Jones. Always a pleasure. Thanks to both of you. So you heard what S.E. and Van have to say. What about you? That's why we're doing this. So tweet me at Chris Cuomo. Use the hashtag Indiana Law. Tell me if you think it makes sense and what are the questions that remain. And we'll take them on here in the special and beyond. Now, coming up on the show, Indiana is certainly hurting. There's no question about that. It's taking a beating to the wallet as businesses, celebrities, and even other states are backing away from the Hoosiers. Now, they're going to take their money with them, which is a problem for that state's economy. But this is about more. This is about politics. It's not about the good people of Indiana. It's about where their leaders put them. You're going to hear the powerful tweet of the governor of Connecticut and what he has to say to the governor of Indiana. We're going to tell you that ahead. A lot of confusion in this situation in Indiana, but one of the few things that Indiana Governor Mike Pence will say definitively about the law is it's here to stay. It won't be amended. He doesn't want a second law requesting as a fixed defining sexuality as a protected class in Indiana. He says that's not coming either. I don't even know if that would fix the situation, but it's not coming. Pence is under the kind of pressure that can make even the most entrenched change course, and that is financial pressure. Businesses are speaking up, big ones, and as we all know, money talks. Here's CNN Money's Christina Alessi. She has that part of the story for us.
The backlash couldn't have been more high profile.
Good morning!
Apple CEO Tim Cook, who recently came out as gay, sharply criticized Indiana's new religious freedom law that critics say is anti-LGBT. He wrote in the Washington Post that such laws are quote-unquote very dangerous and will hurt jobs and growth. Indiana's economy is already feeling the impact. Local success story Angie's List announced it's putting its expansion plans in the state on hold.
We're unwilling to engage in an economic development agreement that's contingent on us hiring people in when the state is sending a message out to potential employees that is not always palatable.
And the drug company Eli Lilly, which employs about 12,000 people locally, said the law is bad for Indiana and for business. PayPal co-founder Max Levchin weighed in.
First thing I'm doing is asking my fellow CEOs to look at how they're thinking about the relationship with the state.
And tourism could be hurt too. The NCAA, which is hosting the Final Four in Indiana's capital, is examining the law's impact on future events. Gen Con, one of the biggest video gaming conventions in the country, is threatening to pull its event from the state. The broader concern for businesses? Indiana's new law could make it harder to attract employees and customers from a key demographic.
This is what democracy!
Millennials, who are overwhelmingly in favor of gay marriage.
Millennials are really the crest of a wave that is shaping everyone's behavior, regardless of the generation, which is that people are shopping increasingly with their hearts, not just their wallets. And if a company reflects your shared values, you'll give them your dollars, you'll give them your support, you'll even become an evangelist for that company.
Hearts, wallets, politicians as well. We heard that the state of Washington is boycotting business with Indiana, Connecticut as well. The governor there putting out a tweet. What did he say, Governor Malloy?
He said that Indiana is turning back the clock on progress. And just to bring it back to millennials for a second, Chris, I got a number for you. Well, there's the Governor Malloy's tweet there, you know, turning back the clock on progress. But just to bring it back to business for a second, I got a number for you, $170 billion. That's how much millennials spend a year. And yes, it's a little bit less than baby boomers, but these are the young people that companies want for life, Chris. These people do not respond to traditional advertising.
But what does that mean? Does that mean that these businesses are just thinking about their pocket and that these millennials, they like the gay marriage thing, so we're going to say we like it? Or do you think that this is conscientious, especially when you have like Cook coming out from Apple?
I am not saying that the businesses are being insincere in their rallying against this new legislation. What I am saying is that this is an opportunity for them to tell millennials they are with them. And the millennials do not respond to traditional advertising. So when you can align yourself with a cause like this, it is good for business. And it is a very clear marker that distinguishes Apple from other companies out there. And there are tons of other companies too that came out, you know, with this bill. And let's not put too fine a point on it. You know, the governor of Indiana is defending himself in a Wall Street Journal op-ed tonight, right? Like you said, there is no indication that he's going to change course. Let's put this into perspective. The business community in Arizona did change the outcome exactly last year when it tried to propose, when forces there tried to propose a bill that was similar.
Appreciate the perspective, Christina Alessi. Pleasure to have
Absolutely.
you here. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to take on what really is the root of this situation, the law itself. What does it do? What does it not do? And why do critics say this law is doing something that's worse than any other of its kind? We'll break it down for you ahead. All right, welcome back to our special report, Showdown in Indiana. Let's get after what matters most here, the law itself. We have legal experts for you, Jeffrey Toobin, CNN senior legal analyst, and also George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley. It's good to have both of you here with us. So let's just take a look at this law. Jeffrey, what does it do, what does it not do, and why?
Well, the core of the law
is it says to individuals and to businesses, if you feel that you have a religious obligation to act in a certain way, to do business with one person or not to do business with another, you have the right to do that. And obviously what this law is mostly about, it's about wedding photographers, it's about wedding cake makers who don't want to deal with gay couples, and it protects them from being sued.
All right, so there may have been some obvious politics that were driving this, but now we're in a legal situation that I would argue is anything but obvious. So let's game it out a little bit, all right, Jonathan? We're going to start. I am the business owner, okay? You come to me and you say, hi, I'm marrying my partner, another man, and we'd like you to do X service for us. We want you to do the flowers. I say, nope, I'm a Christian and being gay is wrong, somebody told me. I'm not supporting what you do. How does the law help me?
Well, what they would have is an affirmative defense that they could go to court to defend their right to refuse that service. It doesn't mean that they would prevail. There's a question of whether this is a substantial burden on them, although there is a curious section in the law, Section 5, that says that this belief doesn't have to be a central part of their religious beliefs, which I think is a bit curious. There's no question that the law goes beyond what the federal law says.
And any other state law.
That's right, but I think in fairness to the people on the other side of this debate, this is a debate that's been long ignored and has been long in coming, that there needs to be some dialogue as to where these lines are being drawn. There are people of faith out there that have strong objections to playing a role, for example, in a gay marriage, and we've been very unclear in this country as to where the freedom of religion begins or ends in relationship to discrimination. You've got two equally important values. Our fight against bigotry and our support of free exercise.
I think Jonathan's right that we should be explicit about this, but we should be explicit that this is, I think, precisely parallel to the people in the 50s and 60s who thought there was a religious obligation to keep the races separate. And they really believed that. And they said they didn't want to play any part in allowing the races to get to be together, to have racial intermarriage, to have people swimming in the same swimming pools. And we made a decision as a society that, you know what, we're not going to indulge that. We're not going to allow that in our society, even if you actually believe it. And the question now is, are we going to do the same thing for homosexuality and same-sex couples?
Well, it seems like they just did it. Jonathan, the question then becomes to you is, was this the right way to advance the ball on what you're saying should be a discussion, was creating what is ultimately a clumsy piece of legislation? It's so broad in terms of giving corporations the right to act religiously, and it's saying that you can do it on a basis, as you pointed out in Section 5, it doesn't even have to be the central or core part of your faith. Was this the right way to do it?
No, I think it is a clumsy law, and I think it is unfortunate. I think that the debate that you're talking about, however, is being fueled. I think Jeff's point is correct. There is an analogy to what occurred before. But in Hobby Lobby, the Supreme Court did say that corporations did have religious rights. They could exercise those religious rights.
But that was a different situation by analogy, Jeffrey, because what happened in Hobby Lobby, and not to kill you with legalese here at home, but it's important for this discussion, they said essentially, you can't make this company pay for things that they believe violate their religion, which was the contraception. Here, you would be getting paid. You'd be providing the service. You don't have to pay anything.
Well, and also it was about the government. I mean, the Hobby Lobby case involves the federal law, and the federal law only applies to the government. The government can't force you to interfere with your religious beliefs. But I'd like to disagree with both of you about how clumsy this law is. I don't think the law is clumsy. I think it's clear. The problem is the people who the sponsors of it, the governor, the lieutenant governor, they don't want to acknowledge what they did. What they did was they gave a license to people not to participate with gay people who are having weddings.
I don't think. I think part of the problem, Jeff, that I'm having is I still don't know where the line is drawn on the other side in terms of this clarity. You know, we've had cases where people where bakeries have refused to do cakes that had anti-same-sex marriages, and we have Christians that say they don't want images that are pro-same-sex marriage. Where do we draw the line on free exercise and free speech? I don't think it's as easy as people suggest. I think there are serious issues here, and I frankly am not sure where this goes. For over a decade, I've been writing about this collision occurring between free exercise and anti-discrimination laws, and I don't have a clear answer. But I do think that we're fooling ourselves when we say that there is a clear line that can be drawn here. Between those two cakes, which is legal and which is not?
Right. Well, look, there's no question that there's no clear line. And there's also, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because, Jonathan, you probably didn't want to be right about it, but you were, and you've been writing about this a long time. Jonathan Turley, it's an important discussion to have. Thank you for that. Jeffrey, as always. Now, we're talking not just about law, but the intersection of law and faith. And when we come back, I'm going to give you the bottom line on which way I think this goes and why. What this law does and could do is all about perspective. Is it designed to discriminate against gays? Well, not overtly, but our society must also be concerned with the subtle, the implicit, the potential for singling out and wrongly excluding people. The irony is that this law is done in the name of religion, and in the end, isn't belief in God about inclusion, not exclusion, and about loving your fellow man? I ask those questions because the answers that people provide to those questions will determine the outcome of the showdown in Indiana. I'm Chris Cuomo. Have a good night, and we'll see you in the morning on New Day.